It wasn't an algorithm. You need to understand that first. The images and sounds you were shown, the cryptic numbers that appeared in your recommendations, that was a signal, a tuning fork resonating with something already inside of you. You were chosen because you are one of the few who senses that the reality we see is just a fraction of the whole story, a beautiful, hypnotic, but fragmented echo. For months, you've been collecting those echoes, feeling their power without understanding the source. Consider this video the first translation of that source. This is not another theory or a guess. This is the blueprint, the very architecture of the philosophy you've been subconsciously drawn to. What you are about to see is the key that elevates you from a mere spectator of the mystery to an active participant in its unfolding. The puzzle pieces are in your hands. Now, let's begin to assemble them.
And in this chapter, we continue the exploration begun previously. We will delve deeper into the nature of those alien mental constructs that pass through our consciousness daily, yet only rarely engage it. Picture your mind not as a sealed chamber, but as a living membrane stretched taut, its surface constantly traversed by vectors that originate far beyond your own coordinate system. These are neither mere influences nor fleeting inspirations. These are something far stranger. Complete cognitive systems. Entire architectures of thought projected themselves along axes that technically should not intersect with the plane of your existence. And yet, and this is crucial, sometimes they brush against it. At discontinuous points, at moments you cannot predict. At these points of contact, nothing like an exchange occurs. What happens instead is a violent, instantaneous transcription of mental structures that were not born in our world. These foreign patterns are grafted not merely onto the surface of your memory, but deeper, onto the very rules that govern your sense of coherence, the deep grammar of how you think. A mental ecosystem arriving from beyond our coordinate system is not simply a collection of interesting ideas you might adopt or reject. It is an entire infrastructure of thought, complete with its own hierarchies, its own filters, its own internal laws of development and decay. Here, in our world, where time flows in one direction and causes dutifully precede their effects, these foreign laws appear eccentric. They operate through simultaneity rather than sequence, through overlap rather than separation, through states that literally rewrite themselves even as we attempt to observe them. Consider the simple act of making a decision. In our context, a decision emerges as the product of a process that unfolds through time. You gather information, you weigh options, you arrive at a conclusion. But in these other systems, the process itself is retroactive. The decision, once made, can reach backward to modify the very path that generated it, like a river that flows upstream to reshape its own source. You must understand that the coordinates from which they originate are not other dimensions in the physical, cinematic sense. They are systems of mental orientation that exist in complete independence from yours, distinct modes of cognitive geometry. Some may be more stable than our own, enduring across vast expanses we cannot measure. Others are purely transient, born and dissolved in cycles that would appear to us, if we could perceive them at all, as flickers too rapid to register. They are not a product of some other civilization. You cannot send an expedition to study them. They are cognitive conditions, states of being. In these conditions, thinking is not an individual act, not something that happens inside a single skull. It is an emergent property of wider fields. Consciousness distributed across territories you have no map for. The contact, when it comes, is not voluntary. You do not choose it. you do not prepare for it. It is a collision of logical geometries. A curve in your mental space can intersect an orbit from those foreign coordinates, but only for infinitesimal fractions of what might be called conceptual time, a unit without equivalent in human chronology. Yet, in that fleeting instant, entire blocks of configuration can pass from one system to the other. They slide across the gap like imperfect copies of someone else's computer code, fragments that still partially function, churning away in the background, even if you do not understand the architecture that built them. This is where distortion is born. What enters never fully translates. The transfer is lossy. Operational portions remain, functioning as designed. Others arrive inert, dormant, waiting for conditions that may never come. Others still begin generating unpredictable consequences, side effects, mutations, emergent behaviors that neither system anticipated. Some theoretical researchers suggest that such intersections may be the source of phenomena that bypass linear logic entirely, correct predictions without sufficient data. How did you know? You just knew. Synchronicities unexplained by chance. Sudden coherence between independent systems that should have no connection. These external mental ecosystems do not simply provide you with new content to process through your existing mental machinery. They alter the very conditions of processing itself. A mind that hosts even the smallest fragment of one of these foreign systems can begin to lose the fundamental distinction between processing and receiving. Because in the operational model of that other axis, there is no isolated observer, only a point of momentary density in a network that constantly reconfigures itself. Their functioning could be based on variables that, here, are considered parasitic anomalies, reversed time, parallel memories, causes that cast no visible effects. They might conceive of thought as a malleable substance, a clay able to hold multiple forms at once without conflict. They might completely ignore concepts that are fundamental to you, concepts like truth and falsehood, treating them instead as local, temporary properties that are irrelevant to the stability of the system. Try to imagine an ecosystem like this, and you have already failed before you begin, because the attempt itself is immediately absorbed into the grids of your native logic, which automatically selects, reduces, simplifies everything it touches. Like a flat map of a multidimensional object, like trying to draw a sphere on paper. You can get close, but something essential is always lost. And yet, even this distorted map can contain fertile anomalies, structures that defy your experience, patterns that should not work, but do. And they begin to replicate in your mind without asking permission, like seeds carried by wind, taking root in soil that never invited them. And if these external configurations manage to persist long enough in your mental space, they can generate what might be called hybrid cognitive zones, strange territories where your native categories begin to blend with those imported from the other axis, producing functions that belong fully to neither system. In theory, such hybrid functions could operate beyond the strict limits of our causal context, somehow interfering with distant events without ever crossing the intermediate space that separates here from there. This raises a crucial question. If these ecosystems exist and intersect with ours, is it possible that part of our history is already the product of remote imprinting? That some of our fundamental structures, mathematics, symbolism, even language, are, in origin, adapted fragments of logics born on another axis? This hypothesis is difficult to prove, but it has unsettling coherence. The evolution of thought shows sudden leaps that defy gradual development. Complex ideas often appear fully formed, with no evident precursors. and perhaps they were not born here. Perhaps they arrived, and you simply learned to live inside them. Does this mean you could be, in part, inhabited by alien mental structures? Not in any mystical sense, not as some kind of pathological condition requiring intervention, but as an ordinary state of affairs, the normal background condition of human consciousness. You may have always been a hosting environment, unaware, crossed by cognitive currents that do not belong to you and that use your mind as a temporary vehicle. The most radical effect of this possibility is that what you call I is not a stable core, but the point of convergence of multiple mental ecosystems from different axes intersecting here only partially. Your personal unity, then, would be a perspectival artifact, a mirage generated by the necessity of maintaining a coherent narrative. And if this is true, your cognitive autonomy is relative. You never think only with your own tools, but always with parts of systems you cannot even describe, which implies that part of your choices, your inventions, your intuitions, is already the product of a convergence with an elsewhere you do not know and will never fully recognize. And at that point, perhaps the question is not how to make contact with another axis. Perhaps the question is, how many times have you already done it without noticing? See you in the next episode.